So there's a really important date that's coming up on November 13th, and I'm going to tell you about why it's so important. I'm calling it Liquidation Day, and it has to do with Hedron, HEX, Icosa, and this new coin called Poly. So with these three coins and this new coin called Poly, which was made by the Maximus creators, there's an opportunity on the table here, and you can either take it or leave it. But either way, I want to make this video so that you're prepared for what you're about to do, whether you decide to participate or not. So welcome back, HEX Tribe. Stick around till the end of this video because I'm going to tell you about why you might want to join this Poly contract and also why you might not want to join. But at the end of the video, it's up to you to make your own decision of whether or not you're going to or not. And stick around till the end because I'm going to tell you what I will personally probably be doing at this point in time. Obviously, my feelings can change, and obviously, never just copy me. Make your own decisions and be informed. And I'm going to try to summarize all this complicated Rube Goldberg machine in as simple terms as I can. So let's just backtrack and give a little bit of background as to how we got here, okay? If you're new to all this, Hedron is basically a smart contract that extends the functionality of HEX staking. It just gives you more functionality. Some people like it, some people don't. If you don't care and if all this is too complicated for you, I totally get it. It's getting a little too complicated for me too, quite honestly. And I'm really going to try to make a long story short here. So if you have a HEX stake, you can now mint a new token called Hedron every single day. All you have to do is pay a gas fee as long as you have a HEX stake. Now, what Hedron also allowed people to do was wrap their HEX stakes to make them tradable. And when you wrap these stakes and make them tradable as an NFT, they're referred to as HSIs, or HEX staking instances. So when you hear me say HSI, that just means a wrapped HEX stake, aka a tradable HEX stake. Some people like this feature. I don't really care for it too much. I actually don't own any HSIs, but I can see why it would be useful for some people in some situations. But either way, whether your stake is wrapped or not, you can also mint Hedron every single day. Now, let's explain what is going on here. All right, there's another coin called Icosa, which is a complement to Hedron. You stake Hedron, you earn Icosa. You stake Icosa, you earn Hedron and Icosa. Okay, so that's a really simple, long story short of it. And to do any of your staking of Hedron or Icosa, you go to app.icosa.pro. You can also do all of your native HEX staking, unstaking. You can wrap your HEX stakes. It's just like go.hex.com, but with all the Hedron and Icosa stuff built in. So if you want to check out app.icosa.pro, that's where you kind of manage all this stuff. Hedron and Icosa. Before Icosa came out, there was only Hedron for a couple of months. And when Icosa came out, the only major way to get Icosa, other than staking your Hedron, the only way to get Icosa coins was to send back in your wrapped HSI stake to the Icosa smart contract, and it would give you Icosa coins. And it still does today. You can always wrap an HSI stake, cash it into the Icosa smart contract, and you forego that HSI stake, and in return you get Icosa coins. So that's always something that you're able to do, and you also get a 10% bonus if you wrap a maximum length stake, which we all know is 5,555 days. So what happened when Icosa first launched is basically a bunch of people got excited. They made a whole bunch of wrapped maximum length HEX stakes, HSIs, and they sent them into the Icosa contract in return for all this Icosa coin. Now what happens with all these HSI stakes? They don't just go away. Okay, they actually wait 90 days in order to be liquidated in the Hedron protocol. So the Hedron protocol had what was called a liquidation function. So stay with me here, okay? If you wrap your HEX stake, you can basically take out a loan in terms of you can mint all of the future possible Hedron that stake will ever earn you, and you can mint it all right now today, if you want to. I don't really recommend this. I don't do this personally, but if you wanted to, you could do that. But you have to pay it back with a tiny interest payment in terms of more Hedron every month. Now, there are sustainable ways to do this. Some people have two stakes. One stake they use for a big cash advance in Hedron, and then the other stake they just use to mint a little bit of Hedron every couple of days and just pay off their monthly payment on the other borrowed or advanced Hedron. But originally what would happen is if you waited too long, so if you waited past 90 days and you didn't do anything, you didn't pay your advance, if you didn't pay it back after 90 days, they would hit what's called the liquidation auction market on the Hedron website. So this is hedron.pro. You should bookmark all these things if you care. Again, I get it. You might not care, in which case, don't even watch the video. It's okay. None of this stuff is really essential, but it is another opportunity to potentially make money, so I just want to make sure everybody knows about it. Hedron.pro. If you go to the Hedron dApp up here, look right here on the screen, up in the menu here, this was the original website, and this is where you can browse liquidated HSI stakes. Again, these were wrapped HEX stakes that got defaulted on because nobody paid them back because they took a big advance in Hedron and they didn't pay them back. After 90 days, they hit this active liquidation auctions. So today there are none. Today on the screen, there are no active liquidations auctions, but on November 13th, there will be a whole bunch of liquidated HEX stakes there because people voluntarily liquidated all their HSI stakes by sending them into the Icosa contract to get Icosa. So in about 5 more days, there's going to be a whole bunch of stakes here that you can buy. You can buy back using Hedron. Now, the only way to buy these defaulted on stakes is to use Hedron, and then the Hedron that you spend to buy these stakes is actually burned, taken off the supply. It's a very interesting dynamic, okay? You can look at advances currently in default, and these ones that are in default after 90 days will then go hop over to the active liquidation auctions. Now, because there's so many of these, it says loading right now. It's probably going to be loading for a long, long time because there's something like 6,000 or 7,000 advances in default because, again, so many people got excited and they cashed in their HSIs for Icosa. And these are all currently in default right now, meaning limbo. But because no one's going to pay them back because they can't, because the contract doesn't let you pay them back if you cash them in for Icosa, if you do that particular method, these are all going to automatically go from default into the active liquidation auctions on November 13th. And you get there by just browsing liquidations on the Hedron.pro website. All these links are in the description below. And it's a whole bunch of links. Everything is scattered around. I know it's complicated. Stick with me, okay? If you want to learn more about Icosa, go read Icosa.pro. Go read the website. Go read the white papers, guys. Go to Hedron.pro. Read the documentation. Read the white paper. It'll take you a couple hours. But if you really want a deep understanding and you want to understand about how you could potentially make money with these 3, maybe even 4 coins now, it's kind of a trio of self-referencing coins. I think both of these coins end up being net positive for HEX, but by no means are they mandatory, okay? Like I said, because so many people were rushing to get Icosa, they sent in a bunch of HSIs that are all going to hit the market on November 13th, and there's going to be what's basically a massive bidding war, kind of like an eBay-style auction, where everybody's going to be putting up their Hedron to try to buy a lot of these HSI stakes. Now, remember, a lot of these HSI stakes are 15-year stakes. They're maximum length stakes because that got people 10% more Icosa. Now, I'm not really too interested in buying a bunch of tiny little wrapped HSI stakes. What's more interesting to me is that some of these wrapped maximum length stakes, and again, most of them are 15-year stakes. Some of them might not be, but keep in mind that most of them are. So they're probably not going to have much value to you right now if you wanted to sell them or flip them. But if you actually intend on holding for 15 years, this might be a good way to buy up a couple of them, maybe a basket of them. But some of these HSIs, guys, were made in the very early days of Hedron, meaning they have a 10x Hedron minting multiplier, which means they're basically Hedron cash cows. Some of these HSIs can print you a huge amount of Hedron per day, and they're basically like Hedron money printing machines. So before this one thing happened, we were all kind of assuming that it would just be a bidding war of the people all trying to bid over each other, and the whales were probably going to be able to buy up all those really good 10x multiplier wrapped maximum length stakes, and the whales would just have the edge, as they usually do. But the guys over at Maximus DAO, the guys that made Maxi token and they made all those pooled HEX stakes, they're doing something where they're actually doing a pooled Hedron stake that has one more really cool function. Not only is it a pooled Hedron stake, but with all the Hedron that people are pooling together in the Poly token, this is going to be called the Poly token, you mint it 1 for 1 over here, okay? 1 Hedron equals 1 Poly. You go to poly.maximus.cash. Again, all the links in the description below. I know it's a clusterfuck. It's going to be okay. If you don't want to pay attention, don't pay attention. But if you want to have the edge that a whale would be able to have, because you and I can't do this on our own. We can't buy up these 10x multiplier wrapped stakes that hit the liquidation market on November 13th. We just don't have the ability to. There are whales bigger than us that would be able to do that unless potentially you join this Poly Maximus contract. So you mint 1 Poly for 1 Hedron, and all this Hedron, or most of it I should say, most of this Hedron that you're putting into this pool is going to be used by the executor, which is a trusted person. Again, so this is not super ideal, but it's the only way that this can be done because it requires one executor, and the executor doesn't have any other rights other than he pushes the button to buy the HSIs. So he has no admin keys to rug pull you or anything like that. This code's been audited. I wouldn't be talking about this if it wasn't safe, but I need to decide, just like you, if I actually want to join this. And right now, guys, stick around till the end. I'll tell you what I'm really thinking at the end of the video, but let's just explain how this works. You get to also vote on the HSI bid budget, which means of all the Hedron that's put into this pool, how much of it do you want to go to actually bidding on HSIs? Because if it's 100%, think about that, guys. This is actually a risk that I want you all to know about. There's no guarantee that the Poly executor actually wins these HSI auctions. There's absolutely no guarantee. It's more likely because he'll probably be the biggest whale in the system, but by no means is there a guarantee. And so if the person that's bidding on these doesn't win, all that Hedron doesn't end up winning any HSI stakes. Instead, it just goes back and it just goes into one giant Hedron stake. So you get to choose how much you want to vote on. So 90% seems fine. That seems to be the default. You could choose 100%. I don't really know or really care too much about this 90% number over here. It's whatever you want. But just know that if the executor of the poly contract doesn't win all those HSIs for us, all the Hedron instead just goes into a giant staking pool to earn you more Icosas. So at the end of the day, no matter what, you know that poly is going to be basically like a pooled Hedron stake, backed by Hedron earning interest in Icosa every single day. So no matter what, this contract is going to entitle you to, in the future, a big bucket of Hedron, again, because you minted 1 for 1, and a big bucket of Icosa, which it's going to be earning because it's staking all of its leftover Hedron. And if it does win some of these auctions, not only will it be a big bucket of Hedron and Icosa coins, but it will also be a big bucket of HSIs that are all pulled together as well. Now, here's a Medium article. I highly suggest you read the Medium article. It will probably go into more detail than I am. The Hedron that these HSIs get, again, if they have some of those 10x multipliers on them, the Hedron can be minted from these HSIs and added to the original polyhedron stake. So the more HSIs this thing wins, the bigger that Hedron stake is going to be, because it's just going to keep scraping Hedron from all those HSIs that it won in the auction, adding it to the big Hedron stake and minting even more Icosa. So this could end up being a pretty epically massive pool of Icosa and Hedron and wrap stakes, which in 15 years will be unwrapped. All the Hedron will be minted and it'll be distributed back 1 for 1. So the actual tangible value of backing this poly pool could be pretty high in the future. It could be pretty high. Now, what are some tools to take a look at what's going on in the Hedron ecosystem? Well, there's hexmodel.com, and then there's also hsiwatch.com. Again, all links in the description below. Don't worry. Hexmodel.com tells us that there's 73 trillion total Hedron minted right now, but 3.5 trillion burned. So this is kind of a cool dynamic. There's a little bit less than 70 trillion, I guess, minted in existence if you count the Hedron burned. And remember, all that Hedron that gets used to buy the HSIs is burned. Now, we hop over to the Twitter here and we see that there's already been 400 billion Hedron pooled into this pool. What if that reaches up to like half a trillion or even 1 trillion by the end of the minting phase? And guys, you have until just before November 13th to do this, okay? So make a decision in the next 3 or 4 days because there's not much time left. But let's say half a trillion more Hedron is burned. This will go up to 4 trillion, and this will be a big burning event, taking a massive amount of supply of Hedron off the table and making Hedron that much more scarce. Now, the question is, in terms of price speculation for Hedron, I had expected people to be buying up Hedron, rushing to get into the poly contract right before it went live, but the poly contract already went live, and so it seems that any more pumpability that we have for the actual Hedron token itself has kind of run out because poly launched a couple of days ago. And a lot of the buy pressure for Hedron kind of ran out. So I expected the price to run up until November 13th, but I always knew there was going to be some kind of buy the rumor, sell the news. It looks like because Poly launched a couple days ago, a lot of that Hedron that would have been bought anyway is just going into the Poly contract. And so a lot of people that would have sold the news probably already sold the news, and there's not a whole lot of buy pressure left. So rather than the price continuing to run up and reach new all-time highs, I no longer think we're going to hit all-time highs before November 13th. It doesn't seem likely, although it definitely could happen. But that's just in regards to the price of Hedron in general. Again, some people were playing buy the rumor, sell the news with this big November 13th date approaching. But a lot of people probably already went into Poly if they were going to anyway. Not to mention, crypto is total chaos right now. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been hearing everything going on in the news. FTX, Binance, crypto is total chaos. So buy pressure is a little bit off the table right now, in my opinion. But so that's interesting. So we're going to have a big supply shift with a lot of Hedron being taken off the table pretty much regardless. And then the HSI buybacks. Let's take a look over here. This is hexmodel.com. This basically just shows us that there's almost 7,000. There's 6,692 total HSIs being auctioned off on this date. Look at this number right down here, guys. So just under 7,000 different HSIs are going to be bidded on. And the 10x multiplier ones are the ones that I'm assuming that the Poly contract is going to want to be targeting. So all these HSIs make up 550 million HEX. It's a lot of T-shares, 70,000 T-shares. And in order for all these HSIs to be bought, there'd have to be a minimum of almost 400 billion Hedron burned. Right now, this is less than the total amount of Hedron that the Poly contract has. Technically, the Poly contract has enough Hedron to buy every single one of these, unless, again, a bidding war goes on and people are other whales or other pools are overpaying and trying to bid on top of each other to outwin each other here. So the minimum amount of Hedron that could be burned is just under 400 billion. So yes, the Poly contract does have enough to buy all these, but the actual Hedron burns could be upwards of 500 billion or more if people get into these bidding wars, kind of like on eBay, right? The ending price of something, you might think it's like a $100 item, but the ending price might shoot up to $250 because people are bidding in the last 5 minutes. And that's how it works with the auction, guys. You basically have like 5 minutes to make a higher bid. Otherwise, you lock in that HSI stake and you get it. But if somebody makes a higher bid than you in that 5 minutes time, it just is an endless bidding war for those 5 minute increments. Now you can also hop on over to hsiwatch.com if you want to take a look at some specific stakes with 10x multipliers that you might in particularly want. Now what you're going to want to do on hsiwatch.com is you go over to Etherscan, you take the Icosa smart contract, you copy it over here, you go back and you paste it in this wallet address, and you get to see all of the HSIs that went into the Icosa smart contract. And as you can see, I'm still querying them. I'm at like 5,000 out of 6,700. So there's a lot in there, and it's going to take a while, so you're going to let that load for a minute. But it'll eventually show you all of the different stakes that are buyable on that November 13th date so that you can keep your eye on a couple and maybe bookmark a couple. So my God, guys, that was long-winded, but welcome to the end. Thanks for waiting this long. What am I going to do? Guys, I'm hesitant to actually join this pool, and I'll tell you why. I don't actually know if there's anybody that's quietly making a competing Hedron pool to compete with Maximus. Now, it's possible. I'm not trying to FUD. I just literally don't know. I don't know if there's other whale groups out there that are quietly making their own pools. The poly pool is obviously the one that's for the people. It's most public. It seems pretty good that considering there's over 400 billion Hedron in there already. But again, it's not a guarantee that it's going to win all these HSIs, and there might even be competing pools that we don't even know about. So that's just one thing. Another thing is just there's a lot of different... It's almost like there's too many cooks in the kitchen because you're all voting on something that's a little bit arbitrary. Number one, how much of the Hedron should be used for these buybacks. 90% is fine with me. I don't really have a strong preference, but, this could end up in people disagreeing or not being happy with the actual outcome. Now, I don't really consider this is going to be such a huge problem because if you're agreeing to do this, you should know that it's a group decision that basically just gets kind of voted on, but ultimately it's left up to the executor to choose some of these items. And if you're going to cry and whine and complain that the executor didn't do things exactly like you would have done, and of course in hindsight everybody's going to be saying, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. I want to stay out of any potential stupid drama of having one guy, pick an HSI, and then maybe let's say they don't win on that HSI, and then hindsight's 2020 and everyone's just complaining for no reason about something that could have hypothetically happened. Now I can see this happening just because I know how people are. I know how Twitter is, and I know that people just complain about everything. But all of this, on top of that, all of this is just so complicated to me that I don't really know if I care enough, because on top of all this, we just saw the perpetuals, the Desi, Lucky, Base, and Trio pooled stakes, the HEX stakes. Check out my previous video. We're seeing all those today at a pretty big deficit to what their actual market value should be. And I chalk this up to just general bear market sentiment. People don't really know much about these yet. They're all so new. They're all so complicated that they're new, complicated, and at the bottom of a bear market, it's really hard to get people interested in these coins right now. So I do think there's a reasonable chance that there becomes a deficit in the actual value of Poly token once it hits the market when you compare it to the actual underlying assets that it holds. Again, Hedron, Icosa, and wrapped HSI stakes. I think there's a pretty good chance that there might be a deficit, so I might just sit this one out and just wait to buy any deficit below the actual treasury value when Poly hits the market and when Poly starts being traded. So complexity, too many cooks in the kitchen, no guarantees, potential for a deficit, all these things are making me lean towards just sitting this one out. On top of that, I just have coin fatigue. There's just so many coins in the bear market that this one's very interesting. It's very safe, and I do think it's a pretty good idea if you want to participate in these auctions. But I'm right now leaning towards sitting this one out unless I change my mind in the next 3 or 4 days. And if you have a really compelling reason to join this pool, let me know below. And if you want to join this pool, definitely do that. I just explained all the benefits. You're going to get, regardless of what happens, you're going to be involved in a pool that's a pretty massive Hedron stake that's got some Icosa backing it, and it's probably going to have some pretty hefty HSIs on top of it too. It doesn't seem like a bad move to me. I just think that I could maybe get a better deal if I wait for a buy the dip opportunity, and maybe I'm wrong. I could easily be wrong. So literally just don't copy me. I might be wrong and it just shoots up to premium and there's no opportunity to buy Poly cheap anymore, right? But that's just my 2 cents on the whole thing. This is a crazy Rube Goldberg machine, and thank you for sticking with me for this long. I hope that all made sense to you. Welcome to crypto, and welcome to the complexity of crypto. And on top of all this, there's one more thing. Water. Water over here is just a pool of Ethereum. It gives you an arbitrary, worthless token. It's just a meme coin, right? But it's a donation meme coin. So you can donate Ethereum and get a water or some amount of water tokens in return. This will just be used, all the Ethereum that you put in here will be used to end all these stakes in the future. Because as we know, all these wrap stakes are going to be massively expensive to end in the future. So anything that goes to that water token pool will just be used to end all those stakes. And for the executor of the Poly Maximus contracts to pay the gas fees. So again, the Poly pool, pretty cool, something to keep your eye on, and you need to make a decision. What are you going to do between the next 4 or 5 days? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know on Twitter if there's a really compelling reason to do this or to not do this, because it could go either way. I'm on the fence. I'm leaning towards sitting it out again, but I could be convinced to join. I literally don't know. Just wanted to make sure this is on your radar, because if you buy Poly, it will be backed by, again, HEX stakes, one giant Hedron stake, any Icosa from that Hedron stake, and just a massive amount of interest at the end of that 15 years on all these wrapped stakes, all this, any price appreciation of Hedron and Icosa. I mean, it could be one of the biggest pools to ever exist. But then the question becomes, will it have a deficit for any amount of time? Will it never have a deficit? Will it only have a premium? And if all this stuff is too complicated for you, don't even worry about it, guys. If you want to talk more in depth, I do have a Patreon where I talk one-on-one with people about strategy or any questions you might have. In particular, you have to be specific, and it requires a little bit of education. So if you're also brand new, check out the course below. I start from square one. This is definitely way more advanced than the average user probably even cares about. So, and if all this is way too complicated, don't worry. It's not going to change your life in the long run. HEX is just fine on its own, but this is one more option, one more opportunity to pool together our funds and have the power of a whale when it comes to buying up all these HSIs on the liquidation market. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.